Hey, Deb here from Deb's Corner Canada. Today we are going to talk about the one-upmanship of the narc. Ever wonder what that progression to the severing or that deadly trauma bond kind of looks like, step by step as you're going along? Kind of what you're going to see or what you're going to experience. How you kind of end up being either talked over, talked about, one-upped, or even iced out. When the inevitable end comes a calling. Ever notice how when you have a problem, an injury, a trauma, something very serious going on, that the narc always has to one-up you or interrupt it, right? And re-steer that conversational car back to that road. You know, the one that all roads lead back to them. I mean, in the beginning, honestly, you cannot have a better listener, right? You can't. Or someone so really kind of intense on every word and past deed of yours. You can't. How does that kind of progress, right? Why is this done? Well, here are the cycles of what is happening. So here I'm going to cover one of the three. So the first cycle here starts off with the love bomb, right? The one where they're kind of getting those hooks in, right? And so I also call it the trauma bond stage. And this is actually where they will seem to intensely, and actually, if you really pay attention here, very, very one-sidedly hyper-focus their precious attention on every word you utter, everything you do, everything about you. So with kind of a few goals in mind here and for really, really specific purposes. So the primary, though, being in this particular stage to gather unguarded, massive amounts of personal and vulnerable data on you. And as we all kind of learn the hard way, a quiet narc is a calculating one, right? They're thinking. And in the beginning, normal souls, normal people, and especially really in those beginning stages, they're really after a connection. So they will usually kind of info dump. They'll mutually info dump, right? With that goal there. And a normal person usually it's to try to find common ground, interest, and establish some sort of a bond, right? By kind of identifying similarities and looking at those differences and working through those. And you will also note, if you kind of look back on what happened, or actually now really as a flag to look forward to, like moving forward, it will also completely show up as very one-sided. And if you do get kind of any info, there are never going to be any kind of solid, verifiable facts, and really and honestly, even mostly completely made up stuff, just a mirror. So this is to really encourage you into extreme one-sided verbal diarrhea of the mouth, I call it. So it's coming one way. You will get no actual back and forth of equal pure exchanges there of genuine info, which will kind of give anyone the mistaken assumption of them being a really great listener, really being into you, really being genuine. And they're so into you. You'll also at this juncture here really hear zero about their injuries, their issues, and really if you do, you will literally have to seemingly kind of drag it out of them. You here on the other hand of this, believe there's simply a remarkably intense bond of interest, you know, and you're assuming it goes both ways due to this kind of newness phase, which is also what they count on and have had tons of practice, by the way, with. So their purpose here is gathering intel to store away for the rainy day they already know from day one is coming. Unfortunately, the goals here between you are polar opposite in nature. You just didn't get the memo. You didn't get the recent memo. And so your aim is to really here positively bond. That's your aim. Theirs is actually to weaponize your genuine reciprocal bonding intention. So when the inevitable kind of implosion from their cumulative toxic behavior eventually arrives, as it always does, without exception, my friends, they have already kind of greased those wheels. They've greased them up, so to speak. And once you become boring or things kind of flatline, which is usually the goal, or they require reciprocation, and you know, you've put your genuine kind of roots down, that will activate what I call the file retrieval program. And they will begin to pull pieces of your original file. They're going to pull the file out, and they're going to begin to work your file. They're going to start going through it. Usually at the tip there of that secret smear campaign that always happens, which starts months 3 to 6 in, where they're just gathering alliances and seeing who might kind of see them for what they are and begin kind of sorting who's who for later use or removal, you know, from your sphere, usually after kind of making that great impression, right? Like charming friends, neighbors, family, all of that, right? Giving that great impression to everybody, that putting on the mask, right? and really preparing them to accept about you later down the road, right? And when they start to hint about all that info that you genuinely kind of exchanged for closeness, right? For those bonding purposes. And if somehow they kind of completely get like unmasked in the love bomb, and which doesn't happen so much when they're younger, but it does tend to happen a fair amount as they age, because they lose their whatever their charms, right? So as they age, they kind of leave that growing body count behind them of deserted, mistreated, depleted souls in their wake. And they will honestly, as they get older, kind of heartbreakingly sometimes even blackmail a previous target, or even an uncooperative monkey, somebody that says no, and good for you if you do, who has kind of caught on or may kind of expose them. And especially if they feel really they might scare the other fish away from that supply pond there. And really the big goal here is protecting and acquiring new supply. It is job one. And so it is really here in essence kind of a preemptive kind of defense mechanism, because they already know that victims all eventually have their limits, and they can't really afford to kind of have that pool of targets or potential kind of targets affected down the road at any point. They can't. And so, you know, begins that smear campaign, right? That secret little smear campaign with the looks and all that. And so really sensitive souls or sensitive secrets that you've given are buried from one and all behind your back. And obviously they throw things in when they begin to kind of secretly turn that tide against you, which really typically begins that moment that you are bonded in. And real life, you know, it looks them in the face, and you're you know, you lose your shiny new glow. It's also where your every little injury in the beginning will be fussed over excessively. Everything you say will be just, you know, they'll be all in, right? They can win an Oscar for that super active empathy and interest. And especially around your friends and family, and also to keep the narrative going and move it forward in front of their own as well. So in essence, they will activate phase one as kind of a pure performance-based preemptive strike, right? They're walking out on stage. So because like I've said really before, this ain't their first show, this ain't their first rodeo, and it will not be their last. And so really here in phase one, well, they're kind of, you know, Hansel and Gretel, right? Sweetening the meat, giving out the treats, and showing that false concern and being empathetic. You know, the victim is going to mistake this performance for intense, genuine, empathetic, specialized kind of interest in them. And targets naturally are going to mislabel this as that kind of constantly referred to soulmate connection, right? And that all the narcs, they love to sell that one the most, I think, of all. So we're going to go next into our stage two. Stay tuned.